Welcome to the School for Ecocentric Evolution and Design Strategies. We're coming to you from the Seed Studio, which is just our tiny home, at the Turtle Lake Community Farm in Durango, Colorado. We're really excited to share with you a special offering that we have for you today.
We had the chance to send some questions to our good friend Nathan Goodman, who works for a group called Conservation Colorado. His primary mission at that group is to educate and inspire the local community to get involved in their legislative process, whether that's at the city level, at the county level, at the state level. He's really just a wealth of knowledge, an amazing human being, incredibly passionate, and I think has a really important message for these times.
This is part of a larger conversation that we've been having about how we can show up as engaged citizens in this moment of COVID-19. Activism is really being asked to adapt and to change to this collective moment because we can't show up in physical protest in the streets or at a county office building in the same ways that some of us may have in the past. So we really wanted to uplift Nathan's work and his expertise about how the will of the citizens can still be directed in meaningful ways to hold certain accountability measures in place and to help oversee legislative processes that are underway in a way that will benefit all of us in the times to come.
Absolutely. We're all experiencing change and at different levels, and a lot's being revealed about the inadequacy of the structures of our society. And I think a lot's being awoken within the psyche and the soul of the human being, of like a desire to see a new way. And so at Seeds, we see it as really important that we're getting involved in our local legislative process because right now, our political leaders are creating legislation and regulatory measures that are going to be affecting our lives in the future. And not just our lives, but the future generations. And so if we're breathing into new possibilities, if we're desiring to live in harmonious ways and to heal and whole ourselves as a community, then we really need to start expressing our voice within those within that legislative process so that voice can be heard and taken into consideration so that we can start to create the values of the future.
Yes. And just like our activism is needing to be creative in these times, so too is our interview style needing to be creative in these times. Because of COVID and the nature of these times, we weren't able to sit down with Nathan in person, but we were able to send over some questions that we were curious about and that we wanted to uplift in his work, and he was able to record those answers for us. So without further ado, here is Nathan Goodman.
Hi, my name is Nathan Goodman. I'm the Southwest Field Organizer with Conservation Colorado, based out of Durango in the Four Corners region. Conservation Colorado is a statewide nonprofit that uses community-engaged activism to push the needle forward on issues like public lands protection, climate action, water conservation. My task here in this region is to, through education, outreach, just getting people involved and feeling empowered to play a more active role in local, state, and federal politics. How I got into this work, as a college student, I studied a lot having to do with water rights and conflicts, especially with tribal groups in the Southwest region. Did a lot of research looking here in the Four Corners, so really believe in the fundamental role that we all can play in shaping what comes next, and a fundamental belief in democracy. So very happy to be here and fighting the good fight with so many incredible people. Colorado has done some really powerful work on climate action just in these last couple of years. In 2019, coming off of the heels of a really successful election cycle which saw a sweep of progressive candidates coming into office, Colorado passed some groundbreaking environmental protection legislation, amongst which is House Bill 1261, or Colorado's Climate Action Plan, and Senate Bill 181, or Comprehensive Oil and Gas Reform. Both are totally unprecedented in the state, let alone even the nation, where Colorado is one of 4 states to have adopted a similar climate action plan, and we really stand to be a leader moving these pieces forward. And that's really where we're at right now, because this legislation's passed, it's written into law, it's going to happen. But meanwhile, the roadmap for how we are going to achieve this climate action goal, or how we are going to reform the oil and gas industry, has yet to be fully written. So in the Air Quality Control Commission, or AQCC, and Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, COGCC, respectively, there is a rulemaking process which is rolling out over the course of 2020, where there's the opportunity for a lot of public feedback and input to guide these processes along. The laws have been passed, that's awesome, but that's half the battle as we strive to really achieve these actionable items. With the era of COVID-19 and social distancing, the world of political engagement has shifted dramatically. The Colorado State Legislature has been shut down for a period. We no longer can gather in groups to flood county commission buildings or the state legislature. We need to demonstrate the will of the people through different means, oftentimes digital engagement, which all the more underscores the need to have a really active and engaged comment writing campaign to demonstrate the willpower of the people in such a way that moving these causes of climate action and oil and gas reform forward are undeniable. And it's an awesome opportunity that we can come together and through these comments share our collective stories of why these issues matter. And we all through this experience can learn to support each other better within the age of COVID and see these reforms hopefully come to pass. So SB 181, Colorado Comprehensive Oil and Gas Reform, has been in the works for years and years, where what it does, put simply, is it takes the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, whose task was previously premised around efficiency and yield, supporting the industry, to switching its mission over to public health and safety and everything that brings to the table. It is a total paradigm shift where we see this agency actually coming around to serve the people in ways that are fundamental. I want to applaud the state legislature, the governor's office, and the COGCC directors currently who are really shepherding this process forward. And it's important that we get public feedback on the table to really highlight a few issues that are important. So as background, the way that these rulemakings go is there's one rule or a couple of rules on the line at a time for respective hearings, where, for instance, in late 2019-2020, there was a rulemaking having to do with flow lines. Okay, there was a public comment period, there was a process, that rule was determined, and then moved forward and on to the next one. Where right now we are coming up to a hearing starting, I believe it is April 28th, that is focusing on three real cornerstone pieces. Rules around emission change, alternative locations analysis, and cumulative impacts analysis. And just to break down a little bit of what those are, the mission change is, as mentioned before, shifting the focus to public health and safety. So fundamental and sets the tone for everything to come, really the cornerstone of this legislation. Second, alternative locations is setting up a system where an oil and gas provider can't just go and say, okay, we want to lease this area. Well, if there are fundamental issues related to water or proximity to homes, schools, properties, etc., then whatever group is trying to lease that land also has the obligation of doing analyses on alternative locations with which to do their oil and gas extraction, which really provides a safeguard for a lot of at-risk communities and people who otherwise would be really detrimentally affected by these projects. Third is cumulative impacts, where typically you only look to the short, with these operations, it's what land is affected, what water is there at the surface level, what wildlife will be disturbed. With these spatial and temporal limits that we're trying to lift, to understand that it's not just the proximal water, but the groundwater, where everything will infiltrate to the neighboring watershed, with wildlife interrupting corridors, migratory pathways, or with things like emissions, not just affecting the local health of people living in the community, but also looking ahead into time with the far-reaching impacts of climate change. So all three of these pieces are so fundamental and work together, and we need your help to make sure that these rules are as strong as possible moving forward. Conservation Colorado is hosting a comment writing workshop webinar on Tuesday, April 21st, that we encourage you all of you to attend and hear some really expert feedback and help plug in these pieces as we all strive to work together and make this future more possible. So HB 1261, or the Climate Action Plan, is, just to put it simply, awesome. I mean, it is so comprehensive across the board, where it takes an ambitious stance on what it exactly means to act on climate. It isn't just stopping with energy production or electricity, but it's saying that by 2030 we have a goal, a legally mandated goal, to reduce our 2005 greenhouse gas emission levels by 50% and have a 90% reduction of those 2005 levels by 2050. That includes electricity production, transportation, heating, other non-point source polluters. It is really so fully faceted and incorporates all these other components to our climate action work, whether that be oil and gas or methane emissions, looking at zero emission vehicles. It really sets the tone and provides that guiding piece moving forward. The Air Quality Control Commission, which really is behind a lot of these rulemakings with the Climate Action Plan, they are just starting their process of hopefully unveiling a fully fledged roadmap and plan by 2021. In the process of achieving that, they are hosting these monthly hearings where they just kind of move from one topic to another, and it's really essential that we go and plug in our voices to make sure that climate action is still seen as a priority. And not only that, but that we're really taking into account the impacts of climate change on disproportionately affected communities and people living on the front lines, our friends and neighbors in tribes and reservations, those of us who are undocumented and don't have this podium or a place to necessarily speak their mind. And that is written into the law to recognize disproportionate impacts to communities, but we really need to hone this in, especially at this cycle. And I mean, we're just seeing such far-sweeping drawbacks when it comes to environmental regulations, namely federally, with things like EPA deregulation or a handful of states declaring oil and gas such an essential industry where we can't mount any successful comment, feedback, or protests. We really have something beautiful here in Colorado, an opportunity to make some really meaningful change, both for ourselves and also as a model for the broader region and even country. So in this era of COVID where we all are really strapped to thinking, how can we approach this crisis, we can't neglect these other threats which are coming to us and which will be ramping up and which will indeed affect the most insecure amongst us. So now is more the time than ever to really stand strong, act on climate, and do our part in really moving this issue forward. So we are in this moment where, honestly, I'm so impressed and taken aback by the power and strength of people in my community, those who work in essential jobs and grocery stores and hospitals, people making masks, people going and helping each other out in ways that are so fundamental and so giving. And what that's doing is building resilience within our communities, recognizing that in some ways we were structurally weak when it comes to our public health system. And in that spirit of building resilient communities, there is nothing more important we can do than also focusing our efforts on the world of the environment and on climate action, where we're looking up ahead at some really scary times, and already we've seen the impacts of climate change with increased frequency of megafires, droughts, natural disaster, sea level rise for those living along the coast, people already pushed out of their homes, and those effects are going to become more and more global moving ahead. So as we're confronted with the issue at hand, if anything, that's just a reminder of all the other host of things we can be doing to support each other, both in a local sense and also more globally. So I encourage you all to take the opportunity to use this moment to really come together, and breed that capacity for compassion jointly as we do our part and help move this climate action mission forward. And we're in such a special position in Colorado where our state government has taken the lead and initiative, and we have steps in place to make a really strong and powerful difference through legislation like House Bill 1261, the Climate Action Plan, and Senate Bill 181, Comprehensive Oil and Gas Reform. For those outside Colorado, I would say simply get involved with your local political process at the municipal level, at the county level, the state level. We see some real responsiveness there in a way that with the bureaucracy of the federal system is sometimes slower moving. And honestly, go to your representatives and pull up SB 181 and say, hey, look at the great work Colorado's doing. See what's possible out here and try to use that as a model to help inform action in other parts of the country. There are so many different ways in which we're coming together and learning from each other as part of this global effort. And that's the thing about climate change. It is this global issue, and there's no one local solution which will come around and save the day. So in the same way that climate change affects us all, we need to be coordinated and strong and consistent with our climate action efforts. So I encourage you, reach out to your representatives, find local nonprofits in your area that are working on these issues, and find ways to partner and work together as we can all be a part of this global solution. So for those in Colorado, like I've mentioned, there are these awesome comment writing opportunities both for the Climate Action Plan as well as Comprehensive Oil and Gas Reform. As an organization, Conservation Colorado has a handful of comment guides and fact sheets that I'd be more than happy to share. So just comment on the post or message Seeds directly, and I'd be happy to get that information to you. You can also feel free to message me at nathan@conservationco.org, and I'd be happy to answer any and all questions and direct you to the appropriate resources. We've seen with coronavirus a lot of things slowing down with government. The legislature is suspended. There are certain budgetary issues which are really being figured out now. But what's something that's so powerful is that there are these regulatory processes which are moving forward and are still happening. So many ways to get engaged and remain engaged. What's special about these two campaigns is you can comment in this round of the cycle, but there can be so many successive rulemakings where you can really maintain engagement through all steps of this process through 2020. So really there's no minimum point of involvement, no point where you've gotten involved too much by any means. So wherever you're at, I'm happy to have a conversation with you directly on what is the best step forward and how you can get most involved with the direction of climate action here in the state of Colorado. There's one philosopher, Arnie Ness, who has really been a fundamental influence with the development of my own environmental ethic. And he once famously put that the strands of, or threads of peace, justice, and the environment are all intimately connected. And he postulates that our own collective, or our own individual identity is not just within ourselves, but is contextually defined by everything around us. That I am who I am because of the air I breathe, or the water I drink, or all the people, wildlife I live around and depend on. So it's sort of this identification that the other is an inherent part of the self, and that existentially we're all in this together. So we're not just here fighting for some foreign issue or for a species of trout or the survival of someone far off on the other side of the globe, where we're all part of the same ecological community. So I think a greater recognition of the inherent interconnectedness of everyone here, and beyond which kind of using this opportunity of global strife to really come together and learn to just be a little bit kinder and more compassionate and giving And I've seen so much kindness and giving and warmth from people in my community and around the world in the wake of this pandemic, where it gives me a lot of hope moving forward as we strive to create this beautiful world.